Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Bob Oaks. Bob Oaks represents the 128th Assembly District. The 128th District includes Cayuga, Oswego, and Wayne counties. And we want to thank you folks all throughout the region for joining us for our program, as we thank Bob Oaks, too, for spending his time with us. Thanks for being here.
How are you, Mike? Good to see you.
Good, thank you. We are closing down this 2012 legislative session. The calendar says just a couple more days to go. Everything seems to be proceeding in a very orderly fashion. Is this really the New York State Assembly? It doesn't seem right.
Well, this year has been very different than many others. Really the first early budget we've had. We've had some on-time budgets, but an early budget passed. Many of the, I guess what you would say, outstanding issues or issues of contention, many of those were actually agreed upon before the budget was actually passed on March 30th, I guess is when it was finalized this year. And so that has set up the rest of the legislative session. It's not that there's been nothing going on. Clearly, the legislature has met numerous times dealing with lots of different bills, but as far as splashy headlines, big-ticket items, very few things happening. But if you look at just the structure of what takes place, even if you don't debate a bill, it takes a period of time to have the bill displayed, for the legislature to make their decision, individuals, on yes, I want to support this or don't, and just the process of that takes a period of time. And so when you're dealing with several hundred bills being considered over the last few weeks of the legislative session, it is quite a process. And I have the opportunity as serving as the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee. Many of the bills that are being considered by the legislature actually have a fiscal implication. And so those bills get referred to the Ways and Means Committee. I'm spending a lot of my time with other members of the Ways and Means Committee reviewing those pieces of legislation, either supporting them or not. If they get, reported out of the Ways and Means Committee, then typically they go to the floor of the legislature for consideration.
A lot of the legislation that comes before the House does have a fiscal impact. So, you know, you're kind of taking a close look at every one of these bills that's coming through the hopper right now.
Absolutely. And so that takes a fair amount of time of meeting with staff and other members. We do a lot of pre-committee meetings to analyze, talk, ask questions about those bills, then go to the committee meetings. And so I'm spending a lot of my time running back and forth between different meetings right now, talking about a lot of those issues.
Yeah, it was a few years ago, one of these think tanks, a group that watches the legislative process here at the state capitol in Albany pretty closely, hung a tag on this legislature, the New York legislature, calling it dysfunctional. It was the Brennan Center for Justice downstate. And that tag stuck. And for years, this legislature was being called dysfunctional. We went through the different changes in the executive with Governor Spitzer and what happened there, Governor Patterson. It seems as if that's all calmed down and that dysfunctional tag has gone away, and the executive and the legislative right now have a pretty good relationship. Things seem to be working as they are supposed. It takes me back to the statement I made at the beginning of the show, where things are proceeding orderly. There hasn't been a lot of orderly in New York State government for the past decade or so.
Well, that's very true, and I think part of that is contention, build up, and frustration. One, you have a newer governor, a governor that's shown some strong leadership, who got a strong backing when he was first elected. He won by a large margin. He had worked for his father when his father was governor. He knew a lot about the process and kind of came in he used a lot of big study groups, make recommendations to me, I'll move forward. I think he was smart about the way. He also had I think he learned a bit from Governor Spitzer, who was here before, on some things not to do, even though maybe he might had a sense of, I'll handle things this way. I think he learned a bit and took from that. And so if you put those into play and the governor's strengths, and then you take the legislature, one, we have some tough fiscal times. And so you couldn't end up saying, I think we ought to be spending more money here or do this. Really, the legislature didn't have a lot of choice on the spending side. And so it ended up saying, kind of, we're stuck in this mess together. How are we going to get out of it? And so all of that, I think, has worked together. Could that fall apart at any time? You know, in this process, you need one of the parties to kind of say, I'm not playing anymore, or I'm not going to play nice and pull back or whatever. And then you don't get agreements, and not much happens. And I think attitudes and long-term associations with people ended up kind of defeating it. As changing some of the process and units and all this, I think, helped bring this back together, and even having a change where the state Senate went to Democrat from Republican to Democrat back to Republican. I would say the Senate majority learned a bit while they sat out as not being in the majority, and maybe that changed a little bit too. So all of that, I think, has worked together to make it.
Yeah, I think the strong executive is probably the key here, because that seems to be what's brought everybody together. When there was not a strong executive, there seemed to be a little chaos. There was a lack of agreement. Nobody wanted to come together on anything. Yep. And now it's just the opposite. Even on difficult issues, of which there are strong philosophical differences, all sides seem to be coming together saying, well, we need to accomplish something for the good of the state of New York. And it just seems to be happening, and it's certainly a pleasure to see again, no matter maybe how you feel about the outcome of the legislation and the direction in which the state's moving.
Having lived through both of those as a legislator, I like the way it is a whole lot better too, and it's no wonder the people in New York State feel a difference, because I think internally we do as well.
Let's talk about a few of the issues that we broached on our last program and get some updates from you. We talked specifically about the problems that a lot of your farmers in your area were having coming off a very difficult winter. For a lot of us, it was a great winter because there wasn't that cold, there wasn't that much snow. It was rather mild, but for the farmers, that created some problems, particularly the apple growers. What has transpired over the last couple of weeks since the last time you were here?
Well, actually, we've had a situation. It was more the spring caused the problem. Obviously, the warm winter, but then in early spring and March, then cold weather, and really it was the fluctuation between getting warm, having freezes, getting warm, having freezes. We had blossoms come out, and then the freeze impact those. You see certain vegetation has just thrived with us. I don't know if you've noticed around, but it seems like flowers and trees and everything are,
it's very green.
Very green.
Very green out there.
And I think that's great, but a lot of our fruits have been damaged. Apples and cherries and peaches and apricots and some of the berries and others. Some areas looking at up to 100% loss, others looking at least 50% and maybe more. And so that means probably higher prices for consumers this fall, less money for those who are involved in the businesses of growing and harvesting and also supporting those businesses. And so there's been an effort within the legislature to create a one-time tax credit for fruit growers that would help mitigate some of the losses. And that has been proposed in both the Assembly and Senate. There hasn't been legislative progress made on that yet, and whether that is actually done or something else later on, I think it's brought to light the real concerns that we have. Some of the farmers do have crop insurance, some don't. Some may have only a modest amount of that. And clearly, one bad year, maybe not on all the farms, but a number of them can have a devastating impact. It's been literally 60-some years since we had something like that in upstate New York.
So again, it can be catastrophic, not just to the individual farms, but even to the local economy as well. I would think you have to have some concern about that, whether there'll be the tourism, events that you'll be able to have.
And even companies like who make the pallets or the bins, the orders. There are no orders this year.
Right.
So the 6 people at your business where you make
effect,
those people are laid off, and the workers who may normally pack the apples or the storage facilities that store the apples, all of those things are being impacted.
Another issue we talked about were the water levels on the lake, and the International Commission, this was educational for me, the International Commission that needs to come together to make decisions on something like that. There was a hearing a couple weeks ago.
There was actually on June 7th, for us as we taped just this last week. The IJC is holding hearings across the South Shore now. A large crowd at Williamson High School. I got a chance to make a few remarks there, as well as attend and listen to others. And very difficult issue. I think that the really good thing now, there was a concern that there's a proposed plan. This plan is going to happen, and we're just a voice. We want to make sure that you know what you're going to do when you do this. I think now there's a feeling of some people are listening. The governor has said, I just had a meeting before this meeting with a governor's representative and somebody from DEC saying no decision has been made. New York State is looking at this. We're trying to get input. What are your concerns and whatever. So I'm at least heartened to know perhaps this isn't a train that can't be slowed down or stopped, and look at this. Because our concern is, Mike, the proposal is, okay, they're going to allow a few inches higher, a couple inches is all, higher than what they allow now, the lake level to become. And so that doesn't sound so bad if you think. But the high level is at, for some areas, a flooding level. And instead of for maybe a flooding incident where you may have heavy rains, and it be 1 or 2 days or maybe a week or whatever, as the floods were this last year in parts of New York State after the hurricane, we're looking at maybe a 90-day time period where we might have that. Well, during that 90 days, we're going to have some winds and storms and pound the shore and maybe make that level that's only 2 inches higher get pushed substantially higher. And so damage to infrastructure like sewer systems, community sewer systems, as well as businesses and homes and lakeshore and whatever, significant. And so we're making sure that the executive hears that.
And the premise here is you'd raise it those couple of inches to the potential consternation of the lakefront property owners and all that, but it would be good for the commercial industries?
It's more, the push for this is more on the environmental side, because they're saying if you don't have the higher highs and you don't have the lower lows, it's not all about high water. There will be years and times with substantial low water. A shoreline doesn't regenerate itself. A sandy beach doesn't regenerate itself, and so you're not allowing some of those things to happen.
I see. So this is going to continue to be looked at?
Absolutely.
And hearings will continue. And you'll report back to us?
I'll report back.
All right, that's the deal. If you folks want to know how you can reach out to your representative, if you want to chat with him about any of the issues you've heard discussed on our program today, there's the information on how to do it. You get a hold of Bob Oaks at the office in Lyons. Call 946-5166 or drop an email at the address you see right there on the bottom of the screen. Bob Oaks, thanks again for joining us today.
Mike.
Thank you, folks, too, for spending your time with us. We'll hope to see you all again soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.